What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about the companions in Hogwarts Legacy. The good, the bad, everything in between. Now, just so we're all clear, this is going to contain major spoilers. I'm going to be going through these companions. We're going to be talking about their storylines, the outcomes, what I think they did well, what I think they didn't do well. So again, we are going to go into spoilers, and we're going to start right now. Okay, the good of this, I think, is Sebastian. I think there is so much to like with Sebastian's character. I think, and I've said this for the full review, I think actually all three of these characters, right? And that's kind of a pro and con all on its own. The three of them, Natsai, Poppy, and Sebastian, all acted really, really well, okay, in terms of, voice acting and all that stuff. I think they did really well, and I think, although we're going to talk about some of the negatives with mainly Natsai and Poppy, when they're present, when the game feels like they want to give them something to do, I think it does it really, really well. It's kind of this counterbalance that the entire game also kind of has. When they go for it, it works really well. When they don't go for it, it's still okay. It's serviceable, and you can tell there's something there. And there is, because I think Poppy is a really cool character. I think she's a really well-acted character. I really like her voice actress. Natsai, I like her. She's pretty cool. Some of the secrets, and again, we're going to talk about a lot of this, but they're just so underwhelming in their impact or their purpose to the game compared to Sebastian. And as you quickly find out as the game goes on, is the most detailed. I feel like he's got the longest storyline. I guess that's not an actual statistic that I'm able to back up, but he definitely, I'll say this, he's got deviation, right? Sebastian is the only one of these three that the outcome actually changes. And again, because this is spoilers, we're going into it, right? So Sebastian can get expelled or not expelled. You have that choice. And what ends up happening is you just replace the lines you would talk to Sebastian, you would talk to Ominous about, who also, by the way, part of why Sebastian is really good is not just him, it's everybody in his quest line. His sister, fantastic. His uncle, Solomon, fantastic. Ominous, fantastic. I mean, I'll use the same words over and over. Really, though, I think in terms of an actual quest line, his entire line of quests is so good. It's diversified. You can actually see his character descend into darkness, which I love, because you can kind of sense, Slytherin, and you kind of get the sense going into the game. Well, of course, you see the promotional material. You know this guy has a bit of like a dark side, but it's actually very cool to see him lose himself on this quest, like his own personal quest, that's pretty righteous. He's trying to save his sister. So I could talk about Sebastian's, line of quests all day because it's incredibly good. It is well thought out. It's well written. Again, it's got those deviation points. It's got impactful moments. When he kills Solomon, it's like, holy dear God, I did not see that coming. I mean, Avada Kedavra is coming, right? So you know that's going to get there eventually. But I didn't think he's going to use it on his own uncle, right? So like, all of these things, extremely cool moments. When the goblins are attacking their little settlement, right? And he has to use Imperio, and he makes the goblin do what to himself. It's incredible. It's awesome. So he is so good from start to finish. And again, in terms of like an RPG, which this game is, it says it is, I think it is in some aspects way more than it is in other aspects. Sebastian is this kind of like prototype. This is what you strive for with your companion. And I'm sure we'll maybe talk a few more positives as this video goes on about him, but I'll kind of leave it there for now because I do have to counterbalance it, okay? Because one of the negatives of this game is that there's only 3 of them, all right? Now, we again knew that. I had predicted for a long time no Ravenclaw companion, right? I was right, so I just want to kind of throw it because there was so much hate that, oh, Alex, of course there's going to be a Ravenclaw. Nope, there were other students in different houses, but what you consider companions in the way that you consider these 3, there was nobody. Now, again, I said this in my review, a very hot take, and I do think an issue with this game, actually the point of this video, I would say Sebastian is the only companion character in the game. Now, that's not actually true, right? Because you do have Poppy and Natsai, but they're not even close. They're not even remotely close to Sebastian in terms of impact, in terms of you just don't feel the same about them than you do with him. Now, that's not to say they're not cool. Like Natsai, her secret that she's an animagus is awesome, and it's just kind of thrown at you in a dialogue line. She admits it. She just says that she is, and it's like, wait, you're telling me this in just a random dialogue scene? We're not going to have like a cut scene to show this. And you do see it at the end. I do think Natsai has some pretty cool moments, specifically that moment, the animagus. I like the back and forth with her mother. I like the backstory of her father, right? This kind of guilt that she feels. And I like that it comes full circle. Again, when they try with Natsai, they do extremely well. Again, the ending with Harlow when, Crucio on you and she jumps and she gets hit. I think there's some really cool moments, and she's a cool character. I like her. She constantly calls you like my friend. She'll say, "Oh, my friend, thanks so much for being here." Like, I like that. And I also like, the backstory of Wagadu and, transfer student and wandless magic. There's a lot to like. So I'm not saying it's pitiful. Like, I do kind of chuckle when I kind of compare the impact of those two to Sebastian, or the fact that it's only 3 of them in the entire game. I do kind of laugh at it because I do think it's pretty bad, but that's not to say they're horrible characters or there's nothing good about them. And the issue actually is that it's right there. Not only is Sebastian really good, but there are sparks in both, and we'll talk about Poppy in a second. There's sparks in both Natsai and Poppy that show you, oh, you're capable. You just didn't do it. It's right there. There's some cool moments in both their quest lines, but it's not even on the same playing field as Sebastian. And that goes, I would say, for, like, I didn't feel nearly as much for those characters as I did Sebastian. He would even kind of tie to the main story. In fact, the whole dark magic thing and being able to take away people's pain was very much interlinked with the main plot. You know what I mean? And as soon as I kind of sensed that, and you'd sense it rather early, right? His sister has this, it was basically cursed, right? And he wants to take away that pain. And then once you start looking at the past of the Isadora stuff and all that, it's like, oh, wait a second. This is a reflection kind of what's happening. And I was thinking in my head, is this all going to come to a head at the very end of the game? Like, does Sebastian literally tie into, say, the last quest of the game? And I would say maybe that's one of the only weaknesses with Sebastian, is he doesn't. It actually makes it seem so much like him and his quests are like colliding with the main quest of the game, and then it just doesn't. Then it literally makes a brick wall, a huge wall, and you just bang right into it with Sebastian, and it just stops there. And then again, that's where the deviation comes. You'll replace some of his dialogue with ominous, things like that. But a lot of the stuff is still the same, no matter what you choose. Like, my wife is playing it, and she was telling me jokingly yesterday, like, oh, I'm going to try to stop Sebastian from going down this dark path. And I was telling her, like, it's not that kind of game. And that is disappointing, because it's like, yeah, you wonder if there's things you can say that kind of stop it. But because it literally isn't that kind of game, it's a game that doesn't really care about what you chose before. It only matters about the present. It has no memory. You lose a lot of that impact. And that's probably where Sebastian's quest line hurts the most, is that there's really, you're just on the ride. Now, I mean, that is generally a thing for most, RPG games where certain things have to happen. I think there's even less amount of decisions and branches in this game versus many, many others, and you do feel that with Sebastian. But again, comparing him to the other two, one of the things that does give him that unfair advantage is his connection to the main story. Like, Natsai starting off kind of with like beasts and then kind of evolving into, again, like Harlow and Rookwood's lot and stuff. It's like, well, that it kind of has to do with the main game, but also, I mean, it's kind of a side thing. Poppy, same thing. Now, I would say this. Poppy's an interesting one, because I think if they gave Poppy the same care and they linked her as much to the main story, or she was just around as much as Sebastian, I think I'd like Poppy the most. I think I would honestly definitively say that, because I think she's just her voice is very like charming. It's very down to earth. I like that character a lot. The thing I would say maybe controversially with Poppy is her quest line is the weakest of literally any of them. I actually prefer Natsai's, because Poppy, well, a couple things. One, she gets introduced so much later than either of the other two. In fact, they make a point where in the beginning of the game, you can pick, right, to go to Hogsmeade with either Sebastian or Natsai, not with Poppy. And in fact, you hear students mentioning her name often in the beginning of the game. Oh, Poppy would like this. Oh, have you seen Pop? Like, you'll hear that. And she doesn't appear until later in. Not too much later, but it's an odd choice to introduce her so much later than the other two. And then when you do, I don't know, like, I don't care too much about Fantastic Beasts. I've been pretty, apparent with that in other videos. her quest line just doesn't get me. There's a couple big moments. The dragon den, the battling, that's kind of one of them. The centaurs, I think, is a super, super cool scene just in general. So she has it. I would say her kind of big moments in quests, like just the cool moments, whether it be cutscenes or whether it be dialogue, they're similar-ish in terms of level to Natsai. I guess her big secret, right, is that her parents are poachers. So it's like, well, with Natsai, she's an animagus, and her dad sacrificed himself for her, and Sebastian's got his whole thing. And Poppy, it's like, oh, so you're just trying to make it right, and it's a little awkward because your parents are doing what you're trying to stop. And it's like, all right, that really, to me, that's not impactful, like, whatsoever. So she's an odd case where I do think she's cool. She's like the friend. She's like the Hermione, I honestly think. And in fact, I don't think there's any change in the dialogue no matter what you do. At the end of the game, spoilers, end of the game, when you talk to Professor Weasley, she specifically mentions Poppy. She talks about how I'm glad you met a friend, or you made a friend this year in Poppy. She doesn't really talk to many people, like, I'm glad you two talk. She doesn't even say Natsai. And that's if Sebastian does or doesn't get expelled. She still says Poppy. So Poppy really is that more grounded. She cares. It feels like that kind of relationship where you could continue it down the line. I think you can continue that relationship down the line more than the other two. Sebastian, even, because his is just so... if he gets expelled, how would you continue that relationship, right? So it's tough. I would say it's got things working for it, but it's also got things working against it. My biggest flaw, or the biggest question that I have, is just you can tell the discrepancy between, like, the levels of talent, or the levels that they decided to, like, go all in. Sebastian is just so much more fleshed out. Fleshed out is probably the term, right? They went for it. They let him breathe. They had him do his quests. They're in different locations. They're deep. His character has an arc, a huge arc, whereas the other two really don't. It's more of like a somewhat mystery with Natsai, I guess some small mystery with Poppy, right? But none of those really play in. And again, Sebastian has that unfair advantage but it's an advantage they made themselves, so it's not really unfair, where he's linked to the main story, whereas the other two aren't. So it's actually a little bit worse than I thought, where I was like, well, it's not just that there's only 3, because, that's a separate thing. Well, could there have been 4 or 5 or 6? Now, I'm not asking for like 20, but, Mass Effect, Dragon, like there's games that have had quite a few companions. Now, I will say, I think to like Mass Effect 2, right, being such a powerful one, I think a lot of people's maybe go-to example, not everybody's the same level. There's better, in my opinion, there's better companions, there's better things that go on and happen with some companions versus others. There's kind of like a 2-tier thing with Mass Effect. I get that. Now, the issue, right, and I think I can make a pretty good statement or point here. The issue is when you only have 3, I'm not willing to accept that you have such a difference, right? If you had 7 companions and 3 were elite, 3 were Sebastian level, and then 4 were Poppy or Natsai, I would absolutely take that, because that would be very similar, I would say, to a Mass Effect, where they're not all the same. You have some elite, and then you have some that are still cool, and that's exactly the same thing. Natsai and Poppy are still cool, right? They're just not all that deep, and that's okay to do. But not if you only have 3 in all. If you only have 3 in all and 2 of them aren't that deep and 1 is, that's just not enough for an open world RPG game. So Sebastian kind of shocked me in how good he was. I didn't think that quest line and him as a character would be that important and that impactful. So they absolutely nailed that, better than I thought. And then I would say they did much, much worse than I thought with limiting companions in general, and then just not giving it their all at all with Poppy or Natsai. The reasoning for that, time constraints, budget, I don't know what the reason would be, but that's got to be something that you fix for the next game. So I think that's pretty much it. If there's any questions or concerns with how I talked, let me know in the comments. I'm more than willing to talk more about it there. Let me know what you think. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.